The new year had barely dawned when Karen, a force of nature wrapped in pastel cardigans, unleashed her first storm. The winter morning air was crisp and biting, yet the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath in the pregnant pause of a new beginning. Our cul-de-sac, usually a serene slice of suburbia, was slowly waking up, sipping on steaming cups of coffee and greeting the day. But Karen had other plans. It started with a letter, neatly folded and slipped under my door like a thief in the night. The HOA logo was emblazoned at the top, its official lines a stark contrast to the sharp, pointed tone of the words that followed. According to the notice, my car, parked a mere inch over the line separating my driveway from the communal curb, was an eyesore, a breach of our community's high standards. It threatened, in bold letters, immediate towing should I fail to rectify my unforgivable transgression by day's end. I unfolded the letter, rereading it as if a second glance might soften its harsh edges. It did not. The words remained as rigid and unyielding as their author. I could picture Karen crafting this missive, her eyes alight with the fervor of a self-appointed guardian of neighborhood order. For her, the HOA rules were sacred texts, whispered to her in dreams of suburban perfection. Yet, I felt myself smile, not out of anger or disbelief, but a quiet amusement. Her zeal was almost admirable. Almost. She was relentless, like a storm in a teacup, spinning tiny droplets of chaos into our otherwise placid waters. I stepped outside, the letter clutched in hand, and surveyed the scene. My car sat innocently in the driveway, an unassuming participant in this unfolding drama. The sun glinted off its windshield as if winking conspiratorially, sharing in a joke no one else could hear. I chose not to act immediately. Instead, I retreated inside, letting the warmth of my home cocoon me in reflection. Karen's need for control was her Achilles heel. It drove her, compelled her to orchestrate a symphony of regulation. I sipped my own coffee, its warmth seeping into my bones, and pictured her across the street in her lair of lace curtains and floral upholstery. Would she peer through her window, satisfied in her morning's conquest? Or would she stew, restless for her next target? I considered my options. A response was necessary, of course, but it needed to be measured, precise. Karen thrived on confrontation, feeding off the chaos she sowed. No, a direct battle would only serve to entertain her. Instead, I resolved to craft a quieter strategy, one that turned the mirror back on her, reflecting her pettiness with the clarity of a mountain lake. The day unfolded slowly, with the sun casting long shadows that crept across lawns and driveways. I moved my car, the task as simple as it was symbolic. Karen didn't need to know the details of my compliance. She merely needed to witness the act. The stage was set, the players in place, and as the neighborhood settled into its afternoon lull, I knew the time had come to begin my countermove. With deliberate steps, I crossed the street, a casual stroll to an unassuming parking lot where Karen's car sat, its own tires kissing the wrong side of an invisible line. The irony was sweet, like ripe fruit ready to be plucked. I documented the scene with a few strategic photos, capturing the transgression with the precision of a collector savoring a rare find. This was not revenge, I mused. It was justice, wrapped in the mundane bureaucracy of HOA bylaws. I filed my report, sending it into the digital ether with a click that echoed like a whisper of victory. Karen's own rules would be her undoing. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I awaited the dawn of a new chapter in our suburban saga. The morning bloomed with an unnerving calm, a deceptive tranquility that hinted at the storm brewing beneath the surface. I watched from my kitchen window as Karen, with her perfectly coiffed hair and a clipboard clutched tight to her chest, made her rounds. Her steps were precise, each one echoing a silent vow to uphold the sanctity of the neighborhood rules with zealous fervor. The kind of fervor that could turn a cul-de-sac into a battleground. My car sat innocently in the driveway, a silent participant in this folly. It was parked an inch too close to the sidewalk, perhaps, a trivial oversight in the grand scheme of life, inconsequential to most, but not to Karen. Her fingers scribbled furiously, a citation brought to life with the stroke of her pen. It was as if she wielded the clipboard like a sword, cutting down infractions with ruthless efficiency. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood, unseen but ever present, tracking her movements. The unspoken tension hung like a fine mist, permeating every corner of our small suburban world. Gossip, that insidious specter, moved swiftly from house to house, carried on the whispers of curtains drawn back just enough to peek through. Absurd rules began to multiply like weeds in a neglected garden. Grass a touch too long? A warning. Holiday decorations still up mid-January? Another violation. It was as if Karen sought to mold our lives into a rigid tableau, devoid of imperfections, free from any signs of individuality or rebellion. Her campaign was relentless, and soon the citations piled up like autumn leaves, each one a testament to her unyielding resolve. She moved with the air of a self-appointed sheriff in a lawless town. Yet there was a flaw in her armor, a crack that I had seen and quietly prepared to exploit. The irony of it all was not lost on me. She was a creature of habit, predictable in her tyranny. She parked her own vehicle in a manner that violated the very rules she enforced with such gusto. It was a small victory, but one that carried the weight of poetic justice. The day came when I decided to act. The plan was simple yet elegant in its execution. I calmly gathered the evidence, meticulously chronicled every infraction, and contacted the necessary authorities. Karen's imperious facade was about to meet the unyielding force of legal procedure. The tow truck arrived with a quiet efficiency, its engine a low rumble that seemed to reverberate through the core of the neighborhood. I watched from my window, a silent observer to the unfolding drama. The driver, a stoic professional, approached Karen's car with purpose. Karen emerged from her house, a storm cloud of indignation and disbelief. Her protestations were met with a polite indifference. There was no room for negotiation, no space for her usual theatrics. The law was a blunt instrument, and today it swung in my favor. As her car was lifted, a strange calm settled over me. It was a small act of defiance, a ripple in the pond of suburban monotony, but it carried a weight that Karen could not dismiss. It was a reminder that even the self-proclaimed queen of order was subject to the very rules she so zealously upheld. In the quiet aftermath, I reflected on the nature of power and the peculiar dance of justice. Perhaps this was merely a lull in the ongoing saga, a brief respite before Karen regrouped to wage her next campaign. But for now, the neighborhood rested easy, if only for a fleeting moment. And I, the quiet architect of this small victory, sipped my coffee with the satisfaction that comes from knowing that today, at least, the scales had tipped ever so slightly towards fairness. The sun cast its long, late afternoon shadows as I stood by the window, observing the street with a careful eye. The air was thick with the scent of impending rain, a fitting backdrop for the brewing storm of neighborhood politics. Just this morning, Karen had left another of her illustrious notes on my car. A threat this time. She claimed it violated some obscure clause she seemed to have conjured from the depths of the HOA bylaws. My car sat innocently in the driveway, an apparent affront to her meticulously maintained kingdom. But today, I had prepared a quiet counter. I had read every bylaw, every amendment, each word woven into the fabric of our community's rules. Knowledge was my shield, carefully polished and ready for the day's peculiar duel. I took a slow breath, savoring the irony of shadows and light playing outside. Karen's house was a shrine to symmetry, Every line and corner screamed precision. Yet beneath that veneer, there was a chaos she couldn't control, a chaos I would soon nudge to the surface. The HOA bylaws were a peculiar balance of petty grievances and genuine governance. Tucked within them, like an overlooked gem, was a regulation on parking. Vehicles were not to be parked on the street for more than 3 consecutive days. And there it was. Her own vehicle, a symbol of her reign, sat untouched by the curb for precisely that long. Funny how she had missed this detail, too busy orchestrating her next move against me. I documented everything meticulously. Photos, timestamps, a quiet symphony of evidence. Each click of the camera was a small victory, a note in my silent orchestration. Her car was an island in the sea of asphalt, marooned by its owner's oversight. As I prepared my report, I considered Karen. There was a certain satisfaction in playing by the rules, in turning her own obsession against her. In silence, I submitted the infraction to the HOA, knowing her facade of control was about to crack. It was a subtle counter, a gentle push that would send ripples through her orderly world. Hours passed like molasses, but they were sweetened by anticipation. As evening fell, I watched from my window, the shadows now stretching into night. A tow truck rolled quietly up the street, its appearance almost poetic against the twilight. It wasn't long before Karen emerged, confusion painting her features as the reality of her oversight unfolded before her eyes. The truck's engine rumbled, a low growl of justice as it bore her car away. She stood motionless, a statue caught in the gears of her own machinations. In that moment, the world was quiet. The rain started to fall, a gentle applause for the silent drama that had played out. I watched her, a figure framed by the rain, caught in the irony of her own making. There was no need for confrontation, no need for words. The scene spoke volumes, each drop of rain a punctuation mark in the story written between us. As she turned back toward her house, I turned from the window, leaving the shadows to whisper their own conclusions. Peace had returned, not through force, but through the simple elegance of playing by her rules. In the delicate dance of HOA politics, sometimes the quiet steps make the loudest echoes, and as the rain washed the street clean, I felt a quiet victory in the air, one that needed no further commentary. The morning sun slipped through the blinds, casting striped shadows across my living room. I watched them shift slowly, marking the passage of time with a lazy indifference. The coffee in my mug had long cooled to a tepid reminder of its former warmth, but I held it anyway, anchoring myself to something familiar. My thoughts drifted back to the events of the previous day, to the image of Karen's face twisting in disbelief as her own car was towed from its self-proclaimed sacred spot. The neighbors had started to notice, and a low hum of curiosity buzzed through the cul-de-sac. Eyes peered from behind curtains. Whispers floated on the breeze like delicate secrets carried on wings. The neighborhood had been a powder keg of tension, with Karen as its self-appointed guardian and enforcer. Rules were her gospel, and she wielded them with the fervor of a zealot. But now, there was a crack in her facade, a small victory for those she had oppressed with her brand of petty tyranny. I stepped outside, feeling the cool embrace of the morning air. The world was waking up, stretching and yawning, indifferent to the small dramas playing out within its grasp. Karen's house stood defiantly across the street, its white facade almost glaring in the morning light. For a moment I wondered if she'd appear, hurling accusations as she did mandates, but there was only silence, a deep, contemplative quiet that echoed louder than any words. Neighbors walked by, their gazes slipping from Karen's empty driveway to me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and newfound respect, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in dynamics. The unspoken rules of engagement had changed, and I was no longer a mere player in Karen's authoritarian game. It felt strange, this new position of quiet power, like wearing a suit tailored by fate, snug yet unfamiliar. I meandered down the sidewalk, taking in the sights of our small community. Each house, each garden told a story of its own. Tales of family barbecues, of children's laughter, of lives woven together by proximity and shared experience. I wondered if Karen saw these moments, if she could hear the echoes of life beyond her own rigid structures. Perhaps she did once. Before the rules became her refuge, a fortress against some unknown fear. The day unfolded gently, a tapestry of small interactions and subtle nods. Neighbors engaged in conversations veiled in politeness, their words dancing around the topic of Karen's comeuppance. I listened, responded when needed, but mostly observed, my presence a quiet reminder of how quickly things could change. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning's chill. I returned home, feeling the weight of the day's silent exchanges. There was a new energy in the air, a palpable shift. Karen would not remain silent forever. Her pride wouldn't allow it. But for now, I relished the moment, savored the irony that the stickler for rules had been undone by her own game. A single line of dialogue replayed in my mind, the only words Karen had managed as her car was towed away. It was more a question than a statement, a crack in her veneer. How could you? A question that mirrored my own thoughts about her many times before. How indeed? I settled into my chair, feeling the afternoon sun warm my skin. The neighborhood buzzed around me, alive with possibility. As I closed my eyes, I let the soothing rhythm of life carry me forward, ready for whatever came next. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the neighborhood as I walked to the local community hall. The air was thick with anticipation, with a hint of rain that never came. Tonight's HOA meeting was going to be different. There was something about the storm that had been brewing silently behind closed doors, a storm that was ready to break. Karen's voice was impossible to ignore, even when she wasn't speaking. Her presence was a force, like a rock in a river, stubbornly disrupting the flow of peace. The meeting room, usually a place of mundane disputes and tedious discussions, felt charged. The air crackled with tension. I stepped inside, sealing the door behind me. I could see her already at the front, flanked by her usual entourage of nodding sycophants. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of disdain crossing her features. I gave her a polite nod, the kind you give a stranger who refuses to move out of your way. As the meeting commenced, the usual complaints wafted through the air, lawn lengths, paint colors, petty grievances that seemed to define suburban life. But I waited, biding my time. Patience, I reminded myself, is a quiet strength. Finally, it was my turn. I stood, feeling the weight of the room's attention shift towards me. Calmly, I presented the documentation I had meticulously gathered, the parking regulations, the clause she had so willfully ignored. Her car, parked too close to the fire hydrant. A small infraction, but one with significant consequences. I saw her shift in her seat, a slight crack in her facade of implacable authority. I shared the evidence with the board, each page a silent testament to my quiet diligence. The irony was almost poetic. Karen, who lived for the rules, was about to be ensnared by them. The decision was swift. Her car was to be towed. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of vindication. Yet I found no joy in the act, only a profound sense of relief. Perhaps it was the realization that justice, no matter how small, often required quiet perseverance. Her face was a tapestry of emotions: surprise, indignation, a flash of fear. For a moment, the mask slipped, and she was no longer the formidable HOA enforcer, but just another person caught in the grip of consequence. As the meeting concluded, the room emptied with an awkward silence hanging in the air. I lingered, watching as Karen made her way towards me. Her steps were deliberate, her face a strained smile that never reached her eyes. Passing by, she paused, a single line escaping her lips, laced with forced courtesy. "Well played." And with that, she was gone, leaving in her wake the faded echoes of her once commanding presence. Outside, the air was cool, the night settling in with a gentle embrace. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the day dissolve into the dusk. As I walked home, the streetlights cast a soft glow on the familiar path. Each step felt lighter, as if the ground beneath my feet had shifted. Perhaps it had. In a world ruled by unwritten laws and whispered judgments, there was a new order, one where the quiet and the patient could find their voice in the silence. In the wake of the tow truck's rumbling departure, the cul-de-sac breathed easier, like a great weight had been lifted from its asphalt shoulders. The afternoon sun cast long shadows that wove themselves into the cracks of the pavement, a patchwork quilt of light and dark. Long-limbed oaks whispered their approval in a language only the wind could translate. Karen's driveway, now conspicuously vacant, was a stark canvas of concrete. Her absence felt paradoxically heavy, as though the universe itself was pausing to exhale. Her constant presence had been as predictable as the morning paper, yet here we were, digesting her absence like the sweetest of forbidden fruits. The neighborhood's quiet was not an ordinary one. It was the quiet after a storm, the kind that makes you realize how much you've missed the silence. The irony was as rich as a dark roast coffee. Her threats, her unyielding gaze, and her clipboard of doom were momentarily vanquished. The air was charged, not with her usual electric tension, but with a soft, budding hope. My feet found their way to the sidewalk, where the afternoon sun flirted with the horizon. I could feel the eyes of the community on me, each pair carrying a silent acknowledgement. We had become spectators of our own lives, bound together by unwelcome spectacle and shared grievance. Yet today, roles shifted. The neighbors emerged slowly, like actors unsure of their cue. Faces that had worn the same furrowed brows now relaxed into tentative smiles. Conversations flickered like kindling, cautious but promising warmth. We were a collection of mismatched puzzle pieces, finally finding our way toward completion. I wandered past Mr. Jenkins's perfectly manicured lawn. The sharp lines of his hedges contrasted with his soft, grateful nod. Mrs. Patel lingered by her rose bushes, her eyes crinkling at the edges with a relief that transcended words. We each wore the remnants of our shared battle like a badge, or perhaps a scar. Both could be worn proudly. And there was something else in the air, a possibility, the realization that perhaps we had allowed one voice to dictate the chorus for too long. The reign of the clipboard had been more than just about cars or lawns. It had been about power. In the days that followed, a subtle shift took root. Board meetings no longer echoed with Karen's declarative edicts. Instead, they hummed with the chorus of many. Her seat at the table, once a throne, now seemed somehow smaller. She still attended, of course. Old habits die hard. But her voice had lost its edge like a sword dulled by overuse. And I felt something unfamiliar, a quiet sense of pride, perhaps. Not just for what I'd done, but for what we'd become. A community, no longer a collection of disparate voices, but a symphony of shared purpose. As the evening descended, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. A breeze swept through the street, carrying with it the scent of fresh beginnings. I stood there, letting it wash over me, knowing full well that tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for today, we were free. In the end, It wasn't about the towing or the confrontation. It was about reclaiming what had quietly slipped away, our voices, our choices, our neighborhood. And in that reclaiming, we had found something infinitely more valuable: ourselves.